Following Manchester City's 5-2 defeat at home to Leicester City in a game they had led 1-0 after just 4 minutes, questions are unsurprisingly being asked of Pep Guardiola. Following 2 truly tremendous seasons, the Citizens finished 18 points behind Liverpool last season, faltering once again in the Champions League, and the 5 goals that the club conceded at the Etihad on Sunday afternoon was the most a Pep Guardiola side has ever shipped in over 680 games in management. Clearly, it is far too early for an inquest or talks of a crisis with regards to this season. Man City have won 1 and lost 1 after all, but I think there is a legitimate discussion that is to be had about Pep, someone who I've oftentimes defended in light of what I would describe as a legitimate criticism in the past. Following the weekend's action, I put up a little poll on Twitter asking whether you'd rather see a video on the recent Premier League handball controversy or one about Guardiola and Man City. However, most people just responded saying both, so that's what I've decided to do. Before I get into the nitty-gritty of some of the things that appear to have gone wrong at the Etihad, so to speak, I do want to make one very clear clarification, since whilst I haven't decided what I'll title this video yet, one suspects it will be something not overly complimentary of either Pep Guardiola or Manchester City, given the subject matter. The job that Pep Guardiola has done at Manchester City is nothing short of extraordinary. I'm not one of those people who pretends that anyone could do what Guardiola has done with the players and resources that he has had at his disposal over the years. So much so that I made an entire video entitled Setting the Record Straight on Pep Guardiola, dispelling some of those myths and giving Pep the credit that he deserves. People need to remember just how dismissive some people were about Guardiola during his first season in English football. Man City finished 3rd in Pep's first season, miles behind Chelsea in 1st place, and even Tottenham in 2nd place, as many people compared the debut campaigns of Antonio Conte and Guardiola. Here was Conte, pragmatic, versatile, and understanding of the rigours required to win a Premier League title, versus Guardiola, utopian, inflexible, and even delusional, some had suggested, in thinking he could take the Premier League by storm with a keeper playing as a sweeper, 3 or 4 number 10s in every starting 11, and a flat-out refusal to ever hit the ball long. Guardiola was mocked. Apparently, he had been found out. The Premier League sorts the men from the boys. The following season, Manchester City went over half a season without tasting defeat, losing only 2 games all season, and becoming the first team in the history of England's top flight to reach 100 points. The 2018-19 season brought the rise of Liverpool, but Guardiola's men stood tall, sticking to their principles, and once again setting a ridiculous title-winning points tally of 98. They won 32 of a possible 38 league games for 2 consecutive seasons, redefining what was possible in the Premier League, playing a unique brand of football which has had an enormous impact on the way in which the game is played in this country, dragging the rest of the Premier League to new heights through their brilliance, and even helping to revive the England national team. So when I talk about some of the pitfalls of Pep Guardiola's premiership and some of the question marks that should be asked, I ask them through this prism. It is only because of the brilliance of Pep Guardiola, in many respects, that an 81-point haul in the Premier League is viewed as failure for Manchester City, and that a team can lose only the 2nd game of the season, and people can already start to question whether they can afford to drop those points, given the title winners' points tallies that we have seen over the last 3 years. Now that we have established the context in which this debate is framed though, the question marks surrounding Pep and Man City's very recent decline come into focus. The problems for Manchester City, as far as I'm concerned, really began in the summer of 2019. Manchester City had succeeded in eating up the ground on Liverpool and recording a 2nd consecutive stonking points tally in the 2018-19 season, thanks to a resurgent run of form at the end of the season. The club won every one of their final 13 games on the bounce, conceding just 4 goals in the process. It was a vast improvement upon their defensive record over the festive period, and that was the backbone upon which their fine form was built. But it wasn't a particularly mysterious improvement. Vincent Kompany, having been injured for much of the season, slotted in expertly on the right side of centre-back alongside Aymeric Laporte. Together, the duo marshalled Man City's backline brilliantly, and Kompany even scored a crucial wonder goal in a 1-0 win, which was, ironically enough, against Leicester City at the Etihad. That summer, Kompany left and wasn't replaced, and injuries subsequently saw Laporte miss the majority of last season. From conceding just 4 goals in the final 13 games of the 2018-19 campaign, Man City would concede 14 in the opening 13 games of the 2019-20 season. Sometimes, football can seem quite complex, especially when it comes to some of Pep Guardiola's tactical decisions, but we all not forget that it can also oftentimes be very simple, and I think Manchester City's problems last season were pretty straightforward. The loss of Kompany and injury to Laporte meant they had to play Nicolas Otamendi and John Stones at centre-back. Because Nicolas Otamendi and John Stones are less reliable as a partnership than my 1991 Nissan Figaro, Pep decided to slot Fernandinho in alongside one of them, usually Otamendi, instead, thus leaving new signing Rodri to take over from Fernandinho in defensive midfield. I like Rodri. I think he's calm, composed, and has an excellent footballing IQ. In the right system, he's an excellent deep-lying playmaker. He is not Fernandinho. We must remember that in the 2017-18 and 2018-19 seasons, when Man City won 198 points in just 2 campaigns, Fernandinho was the best defensive midfielder in the Premier League. Despite being on the wrong side of 30, he had fantastic athleticism, he knew when to commit a clever foul, he won the ball back with aggression and precision, and he retained and recycled possession like a master of his craft. His performance when Man City beat Liverpool 2-1 in a game that really swung the momentum that season is among the best I've ever seen in the Premier League. On this front, I think there are 2 valid criticisms of Pep Guardiola. Or at least one valid criticism of Pep Guardiola and one valid criticism of both him, Txiki Begiristain, and the other key decision makers and transfer puppet masters at the Etihad. The first was simply failing to replace Vincent Kompany. As much as I have long held out hope for him, there were no indications that John Stones was going to be capable of filling those boots in the summer of 2019, and for a club with such deep pockets, not replacing their club captain was a big mistake. The second mistake, I think, was not so much the signing of Rodri in of itself, as I've said, I like him, but of thinking that Rodri could do the job of Fernandinho in this current Manchester City team. I've no doubt that Pep had hoped to give Fernandinho at least another season in defensive midfield were it not for those injuries to Aymeric Laporte, but I also think he signed Rodri as a long-term replacement for Fernandinho. And once Fernandinho was moved to centre-back, we saw gaping holes in the Manchester City midfield. We must remember that at Barcelona, Pep didn't really have a Fernandinho-type player. I mean, he did have one in Mascherano, but he turned him into a centre-back, and while Seydou Keita could play in defensive midfield, he wasn't really a Fernandinho type. Barca's most frequent midfield 3 was obviously Busquets, Xavi, and Iniesta. There was no need for a destructor because the opposition never touched the ball. On the rare occasions in which they did, they were swamped, surrounded by players, and typically forced to surrender possession in seconds. Busquets read the game like no one else, but his defensive work was few and far between, because Barcelona were just so good. I get the impression that Guardiola felt that Rodri could be his Busquets, and that this Man City team could get away with the same luxury of having 3 midfielders, none of whom are really renowned for their workmanlike qualities or crunching tackles. I'm aware that I'm at risk of sounding like those naysayers who said you couldn't play the Pep way in the Premier League 4 years ago, and I'm not actually saying that you do need a Fernandinho type of player in the Premier League. That Barcelona team of 09-11 at least would have walked to the Premier League title. My point is that this Man City team isn't as good as that Barcelona team. No one is. And that this Man City team, for now at least, does need Fernandinho. And boy oh boy did we see that after he went off against Leicester. This summer, Guardiola and Man City have made efforts to rectify their centre-back problems through the arrival of Nathan Ake, and by the time this video comes out, probably Ruben Dias. Ake, I think, can do well under Pep, albeit he didn't come cheap, and I wouldn't be at all surprised to see him starting games at left-back once Aymeric Laporte is fully fit. Dias, I've been saying, had to have been a target for Man City on this channel for months, although one suspects it took them shipping 5 goals to Leicester to fork out the £62 million that it has apparently taken to get him out of Benfica. Both will strengthen the Manchester City back line, as you would expect for circa £100 million, but the problems that have been left to fester go beyond centre-back for the citizens now. Benjamin Mendy is a mess at left-back, hence why I wouldn't be surprised to see Ake there, or even Zinchenko again. Kyle Walker has himself become a liability, far too reliant on his pace as a get-out-of-jail free card at the age of 30, occasionally reckless, and routinely dreadful in recent months when it comes to his decision-making. A case could be made, I think, for Man City's best backline being Joao Cancelo, Ruben Dias, Aymeric Laporte, and Nathan Ake once everyone is fit. And that is not what you might call a world-class back four when one thinks of the sheer amount of money that Man City have spent on defenders both before, but particularly after, the arrival of Pep Guardiola. As well as their defensive frailties, which are not easily fixed, the other key concern surrounding Pep and Man City is surely fatigue. I can't seem to find the clip now, but I remember watching a video from a Bayern Munich player in which he said that whilst he was sad to see Pep go, he didn't think he could take more than 3 years playing under him. Guardiola is relentlessly demanding of his players, both physically in terms of their pressing and movement, both in and out of possession, but also mentally in terms of knowing their jobs and following his instructions exactly as they have been laid out. The result is often mental and physical fatigue, and off the back of 2 seasons of the highest quality, it's possible we saw some of that from Man City in the league last season. Beyond just the stresses and strains that he puts on his players though, Pep is arguably even more demanding of himself. When he left Barcelona after 4 seasons, Guardiola stated, 4 years. That gets everyone tired. The new coach will give things that I can't give anymore. I've always wanted short-term contracts. 4 years is an eternity as Barca coach. The main reason why I've taken this decision is because 4 years is many years. I've given everything and I have nothing left, and I need to recharge my batteries. End quote. Burnout is something that Pep has always been acutely aware of, appearing physically beaten once his 4 years in Catalonia came to an end, despite the sheer enormity of his success in the province of his birth and with the club that he loves above all else. Following that success, Guardiola took a 12-month sabbatical, turning down Abramovich's billions for a year, spent recharging his batteries in New York. He returned to football with Bayern Munich, where he spent 3 seasons, but there would be no break between his Bayern departure and his arrival at the Etihad. This is the first time that Pep has entered a 5th season with the club, and it's also his 8th consecutive season in management without any breaks other than pre-season, which is a fairly intense schedule for someone who works with the demands and both internal and external pressures that Pep Guardiola does. Following that 5-2 defeat to Leicester, I saw a lot of similar signs from Pep as we saw from him at Barcelona in 2012. He looked tired, dishevelled, and in need of another 12 months in New York. Don't we all though, eh? In all seriousness though, there have been suggestions that Guardiola has stayed on longer at Man City due to commitments to the people who brought him to the club and due to his determination to win the Champions League. But if he is suffering from serious mental fatigue, Man City's chances of success in the 5th and 6th seasons of Pep's reign will surely be greatly diminished. I think other question marks remain over some of Guardiola's selection decisions, most notably in the Champions League against Lyon, when he started Fernandinho, Eric Garcia, Laporte, Rodri, Walker, Gundogan and Cancelo against significantly inferior opponents, benching Bernardo Silva, David Silva, Riyad Mahrez and Phil Foden in the process, and proceeding to lose 3-1, and also some of his substitutes, such as that decision to take off Fernandinho rather than Rodri against Leicester, which left his side so vulnerable to the Foxes on the counter-attack. Man City also have some serious injury problems, with the likes of Benjamin Mendy, Aymeric Laporte and Sergio Aguero having suffered repeated setbacks, and whilst one could suggest that maybe being without Mendy in his current form doesn't really constitute a setback, the citizens are certainly far weaker when they are without Laporte and Aguero. To counter a lot of that, I also don't think we can completely overlook the fact that Manchester City, Manchester United and Wolves had the 3 shortest pre-seasons in the Premier League, and as such, the least amount of time to prepare for the current campaign. So perhaps we shouldn't be totally surprised that all 3 have suffered some dubious early season results. I think it is absolutely right that people should be asking questions of Pep Guardiola and Manchester City, in light of the standards that they have set in recent years and some of the warning signs that appear to be flashing. I think they have some deep-rooted problems, some of which don't have any quick fixes, and to add insult to injury, the Liverpool machine shows no signs of letting up. One thing I'm fairly sure of, however, is that Pep Guardiola isn't done in football. Even if he is severely fatigued at Man City, and this is to be his last season at the Etihad, I've no doubt Pep will be back playing an exquisite brand of football before long, and the game is all the richer for his presence. Thank you all for watching today's video. I hope you thoroughly enjoyed it, or at least found it somewhat watchable. Hit that like button unless you absolutely hated it, and even if you did. Feel free to share your views down below in the comment section, and as always, I would strongly urge you to subscribe to HITC Sevens because, well, I would, wouldn't I? But also because it's absolutely brilliant. Oh, and if YouTube videos aren't enough for you, I'm on Twitter and Instagram, where I can be found by the username @HITC Sevens on both platforms.